In this presentation, we examine how major financial resources in Canada are being channeled into climate change denialism and into coordinated efforts to weaken or dismantle environmental regulations. What we find is not a handful of fringe activists, but an interconnected ecosystem of well-funded organizations, industry groups, and political actors whose work slows climate action, reshapes public opinion, and protects the profitability of carbon-intensive sectors. Yes. Large amounts of money are flowing into climate denial messaging and anti-regulatory campaigns in Canada, and the scale of this activity is significant. Funding comes from fossil fuel corporations, private foundations, industry-aligned advocacy groups, and think tanks that either cast doubt on climate science or push for weaker environmental oversight. These groups amplify misinformation, challenge science-based climate policies, and build public narratives that portray climate regulation as harmful, unnecessary, or ideological. The overall result is a coordinated system designed to delay climate action, creating real risks for Canada's economy, environment, and long-term competitiveness. Canada has documented cases of major donations flowing to organizations that actively deny or undermine climate science. Charitable and financial filings show that several groups have received millions of dollars from donors linked to fossil fuel interests or conservative policy networks. One example is the Friends of Science Society, which is one of the most active climate denial organizations in the country and has been tied to industry-linked funding, including support traced through U.S. coal sector disclosures. Investigative reporting by DeSmog and others reveals that private foundations have quietly directed large sums to Canadian think tanks that cast doubt on climate science or attack federal clean energy policies. Even provincial inquiries have unintentionally exposed domestic funding networks amplifying anti-climate messaging, often at a scale far larger than any foreign influence. Financial influence does not stop at climate denial. Powerful industry associations, lobby groups, and policy organizations invest heavily in resisting or weakening environmental protections. These actors oppose emissions caps, methane rules, clean fuel standards, and stricter reclamation requirements for oil and gas sites. Public relations campaigns often frame environmental regulations as economic threats, even as the clean tech, EV, and renewable energy sectors are some of Canada's fastest-growing job creators. Well-funded think tanks routinely publish reports arguing against carbon pricing or clean fuel mandates, shaping political narratives and public attitudes. Together, these campaigns form a coordinated resistance to science-aligned climate policy. The primary beneficiaries are fossil fuel corporations and extraction-heavy industries, which avoid costly emissions reduction requirements and continue generating profits from carbon-intensive operations. Pipeline and resource companies benefit from weakened environmental reviews and reduced regulatory scrutiny. Political actors aligned with deregulatory platforms benefit through donor support, mobilized voters, and narratives that align with the interests of major energy producers. Certain think tanks gain both ideological and financial advantages by producing content that appeals to their funders, while global fossil fuel markets benefit when Canada's transition slows, keeping demand for oil and gas higher for longer. The effects of this funding ecosystem are wide-ranging and increasingly visible. Every year of delayed climate action compounds long-term economic costs, including infrastructure damage, disaster response spending, insurance pressures, and lost competitiveness in the clean technology economy. Public trust erodes when denialist narratives muddy the difference between scientific consensus and fringe opinion. Investment in emerging sectors such as batteries, critical minerals, renewables, and EV manufacturing slows when climate policy appears unstable or politically contested. Ultimately, dark money influence weakens Canada's climate resilience and undermines the country's ability to lead in the industries of the future. Canada is facing well-organized and well-funded campaigns that undermine climate science and weaken environmental protections. These efforts are driven overwhelmingly by interests that profit from regulatory delay, and they impose real costs on Canadians by slowing economic diversification, weakening environmental resilience, and compromising the country's long-term competitiveness. Understanding this ecosystem is critically important because the struggle over climate misinformation is, at its core, a struggle over Canada's economic future. This analysis draws on peer-reviewed research, investigative journalism, and climate policy monitoring organizations. The National Institutes of Health provided the scientific overview used to confirm the structure of climate denial networks in Canada and the United States. DeSmog's reporting supplied detailed evidence of funding flows from private foundations and industry-linked donors to Canadian climate denial groups. Environmental Defense contributed analysis on lobbying intensity and the political strategies used by fossil fuel interests. The Narwhal's investigative reporting provided documentation of direct financial ties between Canadian denial groups and U.S. coal companies. Reuters contributed coverage of industry groups removing climate messaging in response to new anti-greenwashing rules, revealing the scale of coordinated PR activity. Each source adds a unique dimension: scientific analysis, financial tracking, lobbying investigations, corporate disclosure, and regulatory context. There is much more fact-checking information to discover.